Chapter 1. Orion adjusted the harmonic overlay and watched the field resolve into something cleaner than yesterday's output. Not perfect, the interference threshold still sat higher than baseline, but the variance had tightened. Progress. Cale didn't look up from his own terminal. Envelope stabilizing. Saw it. Think we'll hold through the emission event? If we don't, we'll know why. Orion tagged the current field state and saved the capture. 3 months of calibration work to reach this point. He wasn't about to lose the data because someone rushed the observation window. Cale leaned back, ran a hand across his jaw. So, the prodigy arrives. Orion glanced at the time display. 18 minutes. She does. You really pull rank to get her assigned here? I made a request. The Lauren doesn't grant requests. He grants strategic allocations. Cale's tone was dry, but not unkind. Which means you convinced him she's worth it. Orion brought up Elena Sylth's personnel file, not for new information, but because the habit of verification settled his mind. Academic record from theoretical physics, 3 published papers on resonance coherence before she turned 26, and a thesis that had identified micropatterns in historical energy distribution data that every other analyst had dismissed as environmental noise. She'd been wrong about the mechanism, but she'd been right that the patterns existed. That kind of pattern recognition didn't happen by accident. Her work on secondary harmonics caught my attention, Orion said. She identified cyclical variance in archived atmospheric data that correlated with emission timing. No one else saw it because no one thought to look at 15-year intervals. Cale grunted. Persistence or obsession? Both, probably. And you want that here because... Orion closed the file. Because we've been staring at the same data for 6 years. Fresh perspective won't hurt. Fresh perspective asks questions. Good. Cale's expression shifted slightly, something between amusement and caution. You know what Naval's going to do the moment they hear we've got someone new poking around emission cycles. Naval doesn't dictate research priorities. No, they just fund them. Cale turned back to his terminal. Anyway, she shows up, she works. Just don't expect miracles on day 1. I expect competence. She's got that. Competence and political awareness are different skill sets. Arian didn't disagree. The Arcaneum existed in a strange position, critical to Rethulia's survival, but isolated by necessity. Most citizens didn't know the celestial engine existed. Those who did rarely understood what it actually did. Even within government, access was compartmentalized. Security through obscurity, operational necessity, and the uncomfortable truth that no one fully understood the system they relied on. Elena Sylth didn't know about the engine yet. Her clearance had been updated yesterday. Today, she'd learn why. He checked the time again. 15 minutes. I'm going to meet her at the checkpoint, Arian said. Cale waved him off without looking up. Don't be too welcoming. She needs to know this isn't a university lab. She knows. Does she? Cale's tone was skeptical, but not dismissive. Most brilliant people assume brilliance translates everywhere. Usually doesn't. Arian didn't answer. He logged his terminal, sealed the active data partition, and headed for the door. The Arcaneum's surface checkpoint sat in an unremarkable administrative building 3 blocks from the central archives, bureaucratic camouflage for what lay beneath. Arian took the main lift down to sub-level 2, presented credentials at security, and arrived in the receiving area 6 minutes early. The space was designed for transition, not comfort. Minimal seating, reinforced walls, biometric scanners positioned at regular intervals. The real security came from what wasn't visible. Seismic monitors, harmonic resonance detectors, atmospheric analyzers calibrated to detect trace explosives or biological agents. Arian waited near the central desk, hands clasped behind his back, and watched the entrance.
She arrived exactly on time. Elena Sylth stepped through the outer security gate with the controlled posture of someone who'd prepared for this moment, but couldn't entirely suppress the current beneath. Anticipation, maybe nervousness, definitely focus. She wore standard academic attire, simple and professional, dark jacket over a fitted shirt, her hair pulled back in a way that suggested efficiency over style. She was beautiful. Arian registered the thought with the same clinical precision he'd used to note an unexpected data point. Dark eyes, sharp features, the kind of presence that made you look twice, not because it demanded attention, but because it earned it. He kept his expression neutral, but his eyebrow lifted slightly before he could stop it. Professional assessment, nothing more. She spotted him immediately, probably briefed on his appearance, or maybe just instinct, and crossed the space with confident strides that didn't quite hide the tension in her shoulders.
Arian stepped forward. Dr. Sylth. Dr. Voss. Her voice was steady, precise. She extended a hand. He shook it. Firm grip, no hesitation. Welcome to the Arcaneum. Thank you. She glanced past him briefly, taking in the checkpoint architecture, the security layers. I've been looking forward to this. Your work on resonance coherence was impressive. Incomplete, she corrected immediately. I identified the patterns but couldn't isolate the source variable. That's why I'm here. Direct. No false modesty. Arian appreciated that. You'll have access to better data, he said, and context you didn't have before. Her expression sharpened slightly. Curiosity, controlled but visible. The briefing materials were limited. Intentionally. He gestured toward a reinforced door marked with clearance indicators. Some things require direct observation. This way. She followed him through 2 more security checkpoints: retinal scan, biometric verification, harmonic signature confirmation, before they reached the primary descent shaft. The lift doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a car large enough for equipment transport, but currently empty except for the 2 of them. Arian stepped inside. Elena followed, and the doors sealed with a solid metallic finality. He swiped his access card and pressed his palm against the control panel. The interface chimed acknowledgement. Arcaneum research level, he said clearly. The lift didn't move immediately. A secondary verification sequence ran, checking credentials, confirming authorization, logging the descent. Then, with barely perceptible acceleration, they began dropping. Fast. Elena noticed. Her hand moved to the safety rail, not grabbing it but touching it, steadying herself. The depth indicator flickered through levels. Sub 3. Sub 5. Sub 8. Arian watched her peripherally. She was studying the display, calculating, realizing just how far down they were going. The Arcaneum is housed in a natural subsurface cavity, he said, breaking the silence. Discovered during geological surveys 27 years ago. What they found there changed everything. Sub 12. Sub 15. Elena's gaze flicked to him. What did they find? Something that doesn't belong on this planet. He paused. Or any planet we know of. Sub 20. The silence stretched. Elena said nothing, but he could see her mind working, processing, hypothesizing, preparing. Sub 25. The facility you're about to enter is built around a single object, Arian continued. We call it the Celestial Engine, though that's not its original name. We don't know its original name. We don't know who built it, when they built it. What we do know is that it's been dormant for an unknown period, potentially thousands of years, possibly longer. We activated it 25 years ago. Since then, it's provided Rethulia with technological advancements, agricultural optimization, medical breakthroughs, energy systems that shouldn't be possible with our current understanding of physics. Elena's fingers tightened slightly on the rail. A single object is responsible for everything Rethulia's achieved in the last 25 years? Yes. That's unprecedented, impossible, beyond current theoretical frameworks. Orion's tone remained level. All accurate assessments, also irrelevant. The engine exists. It functions. We study it. Sub 38. The descent began to slow. Deceleration pressed gently upward through their feet. How big is it? Elena asked. You'll see in a moment. Sub 40. The lift stopped. The doors opened onto a staging area carved from living rock. Walls smoothed but still showing geological strata, reinforced with structural lattice plating. Conduits ran along the ceiling carrying power and data feeds. Environmental systems hummed quietly, maintaining atmospheric stability this far underground. Orion stepped out. Elena followed, her gaze tracking across the space with the focused attention of someone cataloging every detail. This way. He led her down a corridor that curved gently to the right, following the natural contours of the cavern system. The walls here showed more engineering: harmonic dampening panels, resonance isolation systems, monitoring stations positioned at regular intervals. And underneath it all, a sound. Faint, constant. Not quite audible, not quite felt. A harmonic presence that registered somewhere between hearing and touch. Elena slowed. Is that... Resonance bleed from the engine, Orion said. You'll get used to it. It's structured. Her voice carried that same puzzle-solving tone he'd heard before. There's intentional frequency modulation. Yes. They reached a final security checkpoint, the last barrier before the primary research chamber. Orion swiped his credentials, waited for Elena's biometric confirmation to process, and the massive reinforced doors began to slide open. Dr. Sylth, he said quietly, what you're about to see, there's no adequate preparation for it. I can explain the technical details, the operational parameters, the research methodology, but understanding what it is... He paused. That takes time. The doors finished opening. Elena stepped through, and her mind stopped. Not thought. Thought continued, accelerated even, firing in directions her consciousness couldn't track. But the narrative voice that normally ran commentary through her awareness, the internal monologue that labeled and categorized and made sense of sensory input, that died mid-sentence. The cavern spread before them. Natural chamber. Hundreds of meters. Ceiling lost in darkness. Rough bedrock walls curving away. Floor plating. Catwalks. Access points. Her brain cataloged these things automatically, shunting them to peripheral processing, while something else, something deeper, more primal, tried to make sense of what occupied the center of the space. It was 8 feet tall. That measurement felt inadequate, reductive, like describing the ocean as wet. It was black, matte black, blacker than the surrounding darkness, which was impossible, because darkness was the absence of light, and this thing seemed to absorb it, pull it in, make the concept of reflection irrelevant. It was geometric, precise. An obelisk, her mind supplied that word, but the proportions were wrong in a way she couldn't articulate. Not wrong incorrect, wrong intentional, designed to be unsettling, or maybe designed for something her visual cortex wasn't equipped to parse. It floated. That registered slowly, delayed, as if her brain had to process everything else first before it could accept that particular impossibility. The obelisk hovered above the floor plating, not dramatically, just a few inches. Perfectly still. No visible support, no mechanism, just floating there with the casual indifference of something that had never known gravity as a constraint. Elena's breathing had gone shallow without her noticing. Her pulse was too fast. The edges of the obelisk were sharp, mathematically sharp, beyond manufacturing tolerance, sharp in a way that suggested the material itself had been convinced to terminate at a specific point in space, rather than gradually transitioning the way matter normally did. The surfaces were flat. Too flat. Flat enough that her eyes couldn't find purchase, couldn't detect the microscopic imperfections that normally allowed human vision to register texture and depth. The obelisk's faces reflected nothing, absorbed everything, and the result was a kind of visual void that made her depth perception stutter. She tried to look away. Couldn't. Not because the object compelled attention, though it did, but because looking away felt dangerous somehow. Primal threat assessment. Unknown object. Unknown properties. Keep it in visual range. The instrumentation surrounding the obelisk registered dimly. Monitoring systems, capture arrays, equipment she would normally catalog and assess. But her mind refused to focus on them, kept dragging her attention back to the central presence. How old is it? The thought surfaced unbidden, and with it came a cascading series of implications that made her chest tighten. This thing had been built by someone. Something. Entities capable of precision engineering at scales that defied her understanding of material science. Entities who had mastered levitation through means she couldn't even hypothesize about. Entities who had placed this object here, wherever here had been when they placed it, and left it. For how long? 1,000 years? 10,000? 1,000,000? Her sense of time fractured. The obelisk existed in the present, obviously, physically, undeniably. But it also existed in the past, a past so deep and vast that trying to conceptualize it made something behind her eyes hurt. And it existed in the future, because it would still be here, floating in perfect equilibrium long after she was gone, long after everyone she knew was gone, long after Rethulia itself had faded into history. The weight of that permanence pressed against her chest. She became aware of her hands gripping the observation rail. When had she moved to the rail? She didn't remember walking, didn't remember deciding to approach. Her body had made the choice, while her consciousness was still trying to process the fundamental wrongness of what she was seeing. Not wrongness bad, wrongness alien, wrongness other. The air tasted different here, or maybe her perception of taste had changed. Everything had taken on a kind of crystalline clarity that made normal sensory experience feel muted by comparison. She could feel the harmonic hum now, not hearing it, feeling it, vibrating through bone and tissue at a frequency that bypassed her auditory system entirely. The obelisk just floated there, still, silent, waiting. That word surfaced with absolute certainty. This thing was waiting, had been waiting, for something, someone. A condition to be met, a signal to be received, a purpose to be fulfilled. And Rethulia had found it. No, Rethulia had stumbled into it, blind and ignorant, conducting geological surveys, and they'd accidentally activated something that had been dormant for spans of time her species hadn't existed long enough to fully comprehend. Her throat felt tight. She tried to speak, failed, tried again. How old is it? The words came out rough, barely above a whisper. Her voice sounded wrong in her own ears, too small, too temporary, too human in the presence of something that predated the concept of humanity itself. Arian's voice reached her from somewhere nearby, present, grounding. We don't know. The geological survey of the surrounding rock suggests the cavity is natural, but the engine shows no weathering, no degradation, no signs of age. It could be 1,000 years old. It could be 100,000. 100,000. The number should have meant something, should have registered with appropriate scale. But her mind couldn't hold it, couldn't fit it into any framework that made sense. 100,000 years ago, what had Rethulia been? What had this planet been? What had her species been? Nothing. They'd been nothing. And this thing had been here, waiting. And it just Floats? Harmonic field equilibrium. The engine generates a sustained resonance pattern that maintains stable levitation. We've measured the field, mapped its characteristics, but we can't replicate it. Can't even fully explain it. Can't replicate it. 25 years of study. The brightest minds Rethulia could produce. Access to technology that was generations ahead of anything their civilization should have possessed. And they couldn't replicate the most basic function of this object. Because it wasn't basic. It was fundamental. Operating on principles her entire understanding of physics couldn't accommodate. Elena's fingers tightened on the rail. The metal was cool, solid, real. Manufactured by people she understood, using processes she could explain, installed in a facility that had been built within her lifetime. The obelisk made all of that feel temporary, fragile, transient. You said you activated it. Her voice was steadier now, consciousness reasserting itself, dragging her back from whatever edge she'd been standing on. Professional training kicking in. Ask questions, gather data, build understanding from observable facts. 25 years ago. Before that, it was dormant, completely inert. No emissions, no energy signature beyond the levitation field. Just waiting. There was that word again. Waiting. For what? We don't know. Arian moved to stand beside her. His presence helped. Something human scale. Something she could relate to. The activation was accidental. A geological research team conducting harmonic resonance mapping of the cavity. Their equipment generated a specific frequency pattern, and the engine responded. Responded. Like it had been listening. Like it had been waiting for someone to speak its language. How? It lit up. Started emitting structured energy. Within hours, it was providing information, encoded in harmonic patterns we had to learn to interpret. Agricultural data, medical protocols, engineering specifications. Like it had been waiting to teach us. Elena's gaze remained fixed on the obelisk. She still couldn't look away for long. Every time she tried, her attention snapped back to it, pulled by some combination of fascination and fear, and the sheer, overwhelming presence of the thing. Teach us what? How to thrive. Orion gestured at the instrumentation surrounding the engine. Everything Rethulia's built in the last 25 years traces back to knowledge the engine provided. We didn't develop these technologies. We received them. We learned to ask questions through harmonic resonance patterns, and the engine answered. Answered. This thing, this ancient, incomprehensible artifact, had answered, which meant it understood, which meant it was intelligent, or had been intelligent, or was following programming created by intelligence so far beyond human comprehension that the distinction didn't matter. Who built it? Unknown. We call them the builders, but that's just convenient terminology. We have no data on who they were, where they came from, or why they left this here. Left this here. The casual phrasing couldn't disguise the staggering implication. Someone, something, had possessed the capability to create this object, transport it across whatever distance separated its origin from this planet, install it deep beneath what would eventually become Rethulia's capital city, and then leave. Why? And it's just been sitting in this cavern? For hundreds of thousands of years? Orion pulled up a data slate, displayed geological analysis. The rock strata surrounding this cavity date back to approaching 1 million years. The engine shows no correlation to any of those timeframes. It's possible it predates the cavity itself, that whoever placed it here did so before this particular geological formation even existed. 1 million years. The number broke something in her mind. 1 million years ago, this planet had been different. Continental drift, climate cycles, evolutionary pressures that had created and destroyed entire species. Mountains rising and eroding, oceans advancing and retreating. The entire geological history of a world. And through all of it, this thing had been here. Floating. Waiting. Inert. Until 25 years ago, when someone accidentally said the right word in the right frequency, and it woke up. Elena turned to look at him directly. Her legs felt unsteady. The adrenaline spike was fading now, leaving her slightly shaky, her hands trembling faintly where they gripped the rail. Her expression had shifted from wonder to something more analytical, a desperate reach for the familiar territory of logic and reason. You're telling me that an object of unknown origin, potentially millions of years old, built by an unknown civilization for unknown purposes, is currently providing Rethulia with advanced technology? Yes. And you don't know why? No. Or what it wants? We're not certain it wants anything. It might be automated, a teaching device left behind, a repository of knowledge designed to uplift whatever civilization found it. Arian paused. Or it might be something else entirely. We interpret its outputs, we utilize what it provides, but we don't understand its purpose. Or it might be something else entirely. The possibilities cascaded through her mind, each more disturbing than the last. A monitoring system, a weapon, a test, a trap, a gift, a prison, a message, a warning. They didn't know. They couldn't know. They were children playing with tools they didn't understand, given to them by entities they couldn't comprehend, for reasons they couldn't guess. And she had just volunteered to be part of it. Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying the obelisk from the observation platform. Her breathing had normalized, pulse settling. The initial cognitive shock fading into something more manageable. Not understanding, but acceptance. This was real. This existed. No, that wasn't right. This wasn't what she'd come here to study. This was what she'd been looking for her entire life, without knowing it existed. Every pattern she'd ever chased, every anomaly she'd refused to dismiss as noise, every late night staring at data that didn't make sense, convinced there was signal underneath the static. Every academic who'd told her she was wasting time on irrelevant correlations. Every paper she'd published that identified something real, even when she couldn't explain why it mattered. This was why it mattered. This thing. This impossibly old, incomprehensibly advanced artifact that shouldn't exist, but did. This was the source. The origin point. The reason beneath every pattern she'd ever found. And she was standing in the same room with it. When she spoke again, her voice carried a different weight. Not uncertainty, not fear. Something harder, sharper. The weight of someone who just had their entire conceptual framework shattered and had already decided what to build from the debris. Dr. Voss, what exactly did I just agree to? Arian met her gaze directly. The most important work in Rethulia. Possibly the most important work anyone's ever done. He gestured toward the catwalks leading down to the research floor. Come on, Kale's waiting, and the emission window opens in 90 minutes. You're about to see what it does. Elena didn't hesitate. The obelisk floated there, still, silent, impossibly old. And she was about to watch it do something. She moved toward the catwalk immediately, her stride steady, shoulders squared. Not the posture of someone being led into the unknown. The posture of someone who just found exactly where they were supposed to be. Whatever this cost, time, sanity, the comfortable certainty of a universe that made sense. She was paying it. No question, no doubt. She was in. The research floor was a controlled hive. Workstations arranged in concentric rings around a central observation platform, holographic projections cycling through real-time harmonic data, and at the far end,
visible through layered transparent shielding, the faint glow of something vast and incomprehensible. Cale looked up from his terminal as they entered. His gaze flicked from Arian to Elena, and something in his expression shifted. Not unfriendly, assessing. He stood, moved around the console with the deliberate economy of someone who'd learned not to waste motion in tight spaces. "Dr. Sylth?" "Dr. Terran." Elena extended her hand. Cale shook it. His grip was brief, professional. "You made good time." "Thank you. I didn't want to—" She stopped herself. I don't like being late." "Neither does the engine." He gestured toward the central platform where 3 primary monitoring stations sat in a triangular arrangement. "We've got about 70 minutes before the emission window opens. Arian probably gave you the overview. Planetary stabilization, harmonic regulation, ancient technology we're still figuring out." "He did, yes." Elena's gaze kept drifting past Cale toward the shielded area at the far end. The engine was visible through the transparent barriers, that impossible black obelisk, still floating, still waiting. Cale noticed. "It doesn't get easier to look away from." "No." She pulled her attention back. "Sorry." "Don't be. Took me 3 weeks before I could focus on the data instead of the object." He moved to the nearest station and brought up a projection that resolved into a 3-dimensional field of intersecting energy patterns. "This is what we're monitoring. Real-time harmonic output from the stabilization grid." Elena stepped closer, but not too close, observing, careful not to intrude on their established workflow.
Arian moved to his own station, pulling up his primary monitoring interface. "We track 3 indicators during the pre-emission phase. Baseline harmonic frequency. Normal range sits between 1.7 and 2.3 kilohertz, currently at 1.9. Energy density at the core stabilization junctions," Cale added, highlighting 6 convergence points on the projection. "Normal density around 14,000 units, currently at 16,200 and rising. And coherence alignment across the grid." Arian brought up a 3rd data stream. "The engine maintains thousands of individual harmonic nodes. Before an emission, they synchronize, currently at 67%. Elena watched the displays, her hands clasped behind her back. "How high does the coherence go?" 97%, Arian said. "Once it hits that threshold, emission occurs within 10 minutes. "And the emission—" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "What does it release?" "Varies," Cale said. "Information, mostly. Agricultural optimization protocols, medical treatment data, energy distribution patterns. Sometimes physical materials we can't replicate. Sometimes just energy we're still trying to understand." "Everything Rethulia's built in the last 25 years traces back to what the engine provides," Arian added. "We capture it, we analyze it, we implement what we can understand." Elena nodded slowly. Processing. Still trying to reconcile the impossible object floating behind the shielding with the clinical precision of the data streams in front of her. Cale checked his console. 53 minutes to window. Time to suit up. "Suit up?" Elena glanced at Arian. "Precautionary." He moved toward a storage locker. "Residual harmonic radiation during emission events. The suits dampen resonance interference, keeps our bioelectric fields from affecting the readings." Cale pulled out 3 environmental suits, lightweight, flexible, with integrated monitoring systems along the sleeves. He handed one to Elena. "They auto-adjust. Just check the seals." She took it, turned it over in her hands. "Thank you." Arian and Cale suited up with practiced efficiency. Elena moved to a changing partition, emerged a minute later with the suit properly sealed, monitoring systems already calibrating to her baseline readings. "Good?" Arian asked. "I think so." She checked the wrist display, where her pulse and respiration rates were visible, both still elevated. "Yes, functional." Cale moved back to his station. 41 minutes. Coherence at 74%. The room settled into focused quiet.
Elena positioned herself at a secondary workstation, close enough to observe, far enough not to interfere. Her hands hovered over the interface, uncertain. Arian noticed. Pull up historical emission data. Archive section 12. It'll give you context for what you're about to see. Thank you. She pulled up the archive, began scrolling through previous event logs. The timestamps stretched back years. Hundreds of emissions, thousands of data captures.
20 minutes passed. Coherence, 81%. Energy density, 17,400 units. Frequency band, 1.82 to 1.97 kilohertz. Arian ran his routine checks, but part of his attention had drifted to a secondary data layer he'd been tracking for the last 3 months. A research thread on deep structure harmonics that most analysts ignored because the signal-to-noise ratio was terrible. He'd been trying to isolate a specific frequency pattern that appeared inconsistently in the historical data, something that might correlate with emission intensity. He pulled up the layer, filtered for the frequency band he'd been monitoring, and stopped. There. Beneath the primary stabilization grid, barely above the detection threshold, a repeating pattern. Not irregular variance, not environmental feedback. A structured harmonic signature cycling at precise intervals, every 2.7 seconds. His hands stilled on the interface. Cale glanced over. Problem? No. Maybe. Arian isolated the pattern, magnified it. Look at this. Cale moved to his station, studied the display. That's deep layer noise. We've been filtering that out for years. Noise doesn't repeat with this kind of precision. Arian pulled up the historical data, ran a comparative analysis. The pattern was there, faint, consistent, present in every emission event for the last 18 months, and the amplitude had been increasing. Gradually. Too slowly to trigger variance alerts, but measurable. How long have you been tracking this? Cale asked. 3 months. I thought it was resonance drift in the lower harmonics, something we could calibrate out. But it's not drift. Arian ran the numbers again, double-checking. It's structured, coherent, and it's been building. 10 minutes. Coherence, 89%. The harmonic hum that permeated the facility shifted register, deeper, more unified. Elena noticed, her attention pulled away from the archives toward the shielded area where the engine waited. Cale checked the timestamp on Arian's data. 18 months? The amplitude's been increasing gradually, small enough that it stayed below alert thresholds, but the pattern's been there the entire time. Why didn't we see it before? Because I wasn't looking for it. Arian flagged the data stream for priority analysis. I was trying to correlate emission intensity with deep structure harmonics. Found this instead. Elena's voice came quietly from her station. Is something wrong? Unknown, Arian said. Potentially just long-cycle operational variance we haven't observed before. But it's new behavior, and new behavior warrants attention. 94%. The projection above the platform began shifting, data streams reorganizing themselves into tighter formations. The engine wasn't just preparing to release something, it was restructuring its own internal architecture to facilitate the process. Orion kept one eye on the emission precursors, the other on that secondary harmonic pattern. The amplitude was still climbing, tracking with the coherence increase. 2 minutes. Coherence, 96%. We'll analyze it after the event, Orion said quietly. Right now, we observe and capture. Cale nodded, returned to his station. Elena remained silent, watching, her hands gripping the edge of her console. 1 minute. Coherence, 97%. The room fell completely silent. The engine, that vast, incomprehensible structure beyond the shielding, began to glow. Not light, not heat. Something else. The air itself seemed to tighten, as if space were contracting around a focal point. The harmonic hum rose in pitch, not louder, but more present, more immediate, vibrating through bone and tissue in a way that bypassed hearing entirely.
Coherence, 98%. The glow intensified. Through the shielding, Orion could see the engine's primary structure, a geometric arrangement of interlocking forms that seemed to shift between dimensions, never quite resolving into stable shapes. Edges that weren't edges, surfaces that reflected nothing, symmetry that defied spatial logic. Elena stood motionless at her station, transfixed. Coherence, 99%. And then, the emission. Energy poured out of the engine in a cascading wave of structured information, visible as geometric patterns inscribing themselves across three-dimensional space. Not random, not chaotic, organized into layers of increasing complexity, each layer encoding data in formats that required specialized translation systems to interpret. The capture arrays activated automatically, pulling the emission into isolated storage partitions while analysis algorithms began preliminary decoding. Orion's attention split between the primary emission data and that secondary harmonic he'd flagged. It spiked. Not dramatically, not dangerously, just differently.
The pattern he'd identified, that faint, structured signal, had amplified during the emission, riding beneath the primary data stream like a carrier wave underneath a signal. His hands moved across the console, running immediate comparative analysis. The pattern was new. Not the structure, the amplitude. It had always been there, buried beneath detection thresholds. Now it was visible. The emission concluded. 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Standard duration. Coherence began dropping. 94%, 88%, 79%. The engine's glow faded. The harmonic hum settled back into its normal register. Systems returned to baseline operational status. Kale checked the capture logs. Full acquisition, no data loss. Preliminary decode looks clean. Orion didn't respond immediately. He was staring at the secondary harmonic pattern, now clearly visible in the post-emission analysis. Kale noticed, moved to Orion's station. His expression remained neutral, but his posture shifted. That's not environmental feedback. No, Orion said. It's not. Elena spoke quietly from her station. I'm sorry, should I be seeing something specific in the data? Orion glanced at her. She looked uncertain, out of her depth, trying to process what she'd just witnessed, while also trying to understand what had Orion and Kale's attention. There's a secondary pattern in the deep harmonics, Orion said. It's been present for 18 months, amplitude increasing gradually. During the emission, it spiked, became clearly visible for the first time. Is that normal? We don't know, Kale said. The engine's been extraordinarily consistent for 25 years, behaviorally predictable within known parameters. This is different. Could it be normal operational variance? Elena asked. Long cycle behavior you haven't observed yet because the time frame is longer than your observation period? Could be, Orion agreed. He pulled up the historical analysis, showed her the gradual amplitude increase. But it's been building consistently, not random fluctuation, structured change. Elena studied the data, her expression careful. She wanted to contribute, but she was smart enough to know she didn't have enough context yet. What do you do now? We monitor it, Orion said. Next emission event is scheduled in 11 days. We'll see if the pattern continues, increases, or stabilizes. And if it increases? Orion met her gaze, steady, honest. Then we find out what it means. The research floor settled back into post-emission routine. Data distribution to relevant departments, preliminary analysis reports, system diagnostics, equipment recalibration. But the weight had changed. Something had shifted. Elena felt it. Orion could see it in the way she kept glancing at the archived anomaly data on her screen, the way she moved with careful precision through the post-emission checklist Kale had given her. She understood. On her first day, she'd witnessed something unprecedented, and in a facility dedicated to studying the incomprehensible, unprecedented meant something. Kale powered down the capture arrays. Welcome to the Arcaneum, Dr. Sylth. Elena nodded, didn't smile, didn't attempt false confidence, just nodded.
Arian appreciated that. This wasn't the time for reassurance or optimism. This was the time to pay attention.